So let's jump into it. Let's take a look at, with a brief slide, what is Horizon Europe all in all. So if we want to sum it up, it's actually the funding program of the European Commission for Research and Innovation. The European budget, the budget of the European Union, is being funneled through to different categories. We have funding programs for agriculture, for fisheries, for rural development, for regional development, for the single market. So among those programs, there's also Horizon Europe. It used to be called Horizon 2020, Framework Program 7, Framework Program 6 in the past, but now it goes with the Horizon Europe title. It focuses on fostering collaboration for research and innovation and directing this research and innovation towards tackling key global challenges. This can be like climate change or other global challenges that are relevant also to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We're talking about combating hunger, poverty, bringing equality in education, gender equality as well. We're talking about making or preserving life in water, life in land, biodiversity. We're talking about making our cities more sustainable, the way we produce and we consume more sustainable. There is really a wide diversity of different challenges this program is aiming to tackle through research and innovation. And of course, it also focuses on developing novel, more innovative technologies to boost the leadership of our, industry, to help our economy grow and provide, the means or the infrastructure required to make the most out of our talent pool, the most of our human resources that are part of our society. So this is in essence Horizon Europe, the funding program for research and innovation. We will be able to have a broader overview of what Horizon Europe consists of. We will focus on the main part of it, which is comprised of three pillars. So we have the excellent science pillar, which focuses more on basic research and providing incentives for researchers to do some excellent research, to move around Europe and gain experiences and produce the baseline for more applied research, which is the core of Pillar 2. Pillar 2 focuses on tackling these global challenges that we discussed about, and as well as, fostering the industrial competitiveness of Europe. Then we have Pillar 3, which is even closer to market, and it's really trying to fast forward innovation, even from, very risky innovation over to more incremental innovation. In general, it tries to get innovation faster to the market. There's also this widening participation and strengthening the European research area part, where Europe is trying to fund activities that can get people, more organizations, that is, from different parts of Europe and beyond, to get into this research and innovation game. So next slide, please. Just to give you a bit of perspective by talking numbers, we can see here that the budget that is fueling the Horizon Europe program, it was close to 100 billion. It was agreed in December 2020, and most of it goes over to pillar number 2, which is, of course, the pillar or the type of funding opportunities that we will be discussing today mostly. So here we have an overview of the work programs. The work programs are the where all the funding opportunities for research and innovation are listed. They are typically published across 2 years. For example, the last one was covering the period of 2021 over to 2022. We have work programs for each of the pillars. The majority of the work programs or the funding opportunities better for the second pillar are clustered in what is actually called clusters, so pretty self-explanatory. We have a really diverse array of clusters where the European Union is trying to fund solutions, new research, innovation, and collaborative actions in order to address digital industry and space, for example, over to health, bioeconomy, food-related challenges. There's really a wide, diverse array. So these work programs, those funding opportunities, they do not really come out of the blue. There is a plan, actually the strategic plan of the European Union, where they, in essence what they do, they set some priorities. They found out what should be the strategic orientation of the research and innovation that they would like to fund, and what are the areas where they would like to create impact. Then they define the expected impacts. What do they want to have to achieve in the longer term with this research and innovation that is going to be supported? And all of this is encapsulated at the end of the day in the work programs, and especially the destinations of the work programs. So the destination itself of a work program describes the different socioeconomic or industrial challenges that need to be addressed by the research and innovation is to be funded under this destination, and it lists the expected impacts, the more longer term results that the research and innovation activities are expected to contribute towards. Under its destination, we have packages of funding opportunities under calls of proposals. Those funding opportunities are actually called topics, and they describe the expected outcomes of the research and innovation as well as the scope of this kind of activities. The expected outcomes are more or less what the proposed project needs to achieve in the shorter to medium, mostly term, after the end of a project. So we're talking about the uptake of the results, or the diffusion of a technology, or the actual market, the commercialization of a new solution and its use by its target groups. The scope of a topic, on the other hand, describes more the areas, the different topics, let's not confuse terms, but the different types of activities that more or less the research and innovation should be including in order to successfully bring about the expected outcomes that are required by the topic. So, and more often than not, the scope is quite broad, quite generic, if you like, because the Commission really tries to favor this bottom-up approach, where it provides quite flexibility to the proposers to really think outside the box and try to identify novel, innovative ways in order to tackle or bring about the expected outcomes and expected impacts of the topic and its destination. So that is in a nutshell how destinations and how topics, what they include and what they present. So here is an overview of the typical types of actions that are funded through the Horizon Europe program, and especially its second pillar and its clusters. So we have three different types of actions. By actions, we really mean projects, but this is like the term the Commission is using under the framework of the Horizon Europe program. So we have research and innovation actions, which are, of course, focused a little bit more on the research side of things. So they are trying to establish or develop some new knowledge, try to test out the feasibility or scope out the feasibility of a new product, a new solution, a new service. They can include a wide array of activities, from basic over to more applied research, developing a technology, testing it out, and piloting in a relevant environment. And for all that, the Commission is funding or reimbursing the costs of the project with 100% funding rate. That means you get all the costs that you spent for the project, you get reimbursed for all of them. Then, on the other hand, we have the innovation actions. Those actions or projects are closer to the market. So we're talking about more mature solutions, products, services, or technologies that are closer to market, and the Commission asks us to produce your plans or arrangements, designs, or other kinds of actions that may be required in order to get them to market. Actually, it might be prototyping, it could be demonstrations in an actual environment, or even market replication if we're talking about getting an innovation from one context over to another. The funding for this kind of actions, given that they are closer to market and for the different partners that are working to bring them to market will probably benefit more on the shorter term rather than the longer term. They are receiving a funding rate of typically 60 to 70%. That means that from the total cost of the project, only 70% will be reimbursed to the participants of the project. Of course, if they are non-profit entities, if they're not working for profit, then they, again, like research and innovation actions, they will end up getting 100% of the costs reimbursed. Last but definitely not least, we have the coordination and support actions. So these kind of actions are not focused as much on the research side of things, but more on getting people together, supporting them to cooperate and work together in order to do some research and advance specific, technological or other research and scientific domains. So again, it facilitates cooperation, networking, provides some support, perhaps business support might be required, some engineers, as Dimitris told us earlier, so as they can, develop their solutions a little bit faster and identify the way to the market. So coordination and support actions are also funded 100% by the Commission, reimbursing all the costs of the project. So aside those typical actions, there are also what we call, or what the Commission calls, competitive calls or calls for third parties. That means that projects, actions, it can be research innovation actions, or even coordination and support actions that are publishing their own open calls for proposals, so it's like Inception. This kind of open calls, they provide funding mostly to younger firms like startups, scale-ups, SMEs, or what have you, and their provisions or their eligibility, meaning who is, able to apply there and get the funding, is more on an ad hoc basis. It depends really on the particularities of the project, where the technology field it is aiming to support, its aims and objectives. There is, however, some kind of consistency that typically the support is being provided ranges from 50 to 150,000, I would say dollars, but it's actually euros. It can also provide different types of services, whether it's through vouchers or through the consortium partners themselves. It can provide some technical consultancy, access to testing facilities, for example, or other kind of business support services, whether it is mentoring, entrepreneurship, training, coaching, or what have you. You might be thinking that Horizon Europe is great, and it is actually. It can give you some funding. As Dimitris mentioned earlier, this is important for the cash flow of a business, especially if you are a startup. It can really provide you with the funds that you require in order to develop your product, in order to be able to try and secure other funding, in order to find first customers if you haven't already, or even validate your idea. It can also provide you with some prestige. It's a competitive program. If you get funding, that means you are doing something well, and you can leverage this in order to get customers or get investors. But it's not all roses in practice. So getting funding from Horizon Europe has its own strings that are attached to it. So first and foremost, the time, you prepare your proposal, you submit it. Now from that time and on, from the deadline for the submission over to getting your news, it might be 5 months. So you will know if you are actually accepted, if your project is accepted for funding after 5 months. And if you are lucky enough to get your proposal funded, then you need more or less about 3 months. It can be a little bit less, it can be a little bit more at times, to negotiate the agreement that you need to sign in order to release the funding. And then the project itself needs to run, it depends on the project, but typically around the year. So what I'm trying to say, there is a time frame that we need to keep in mind when we are deciding whether Horizon Europe is the program to fund our solution, our innovation cycle. And if you are looking for a faster innovation cycle, perhaps this is not the program for you, as it will take some time. Another thing to keep in mind is the collaborative aspect of research and innovation in Horizon Europe. So you really get, you or whoever is participating in such projects, they get this excellent opportunity to work with very interesting organizations from around Europe. All of these projects need to have at least 3 participants, I believe, from different EU member states and even outside Europe at times. At the same time, this can be, a very interesting experience, but it also means that you might be working on developing some new solutions, some new technologies, some new products with other partners. That means that you will have to share or at least come up with some agreements regarding the outcome of your research and innovation, meaning your intellectual property or other research results. So you need to be aware how to protect your intellectual property, and you need to be focusing a little bit also on how you manage it during and after the course of the project. So of course, there are a lot of clauses for IPR management that are already part of the grant agreement. I mentioned earlier is the agreement that you have to actually sign with the Commission in order to release the funding and start implementing the project. This agreement is not easily changed, and we typically have to be quite close to it when it comes to implement the project. It leaves really very little wiggle room for pivots, try to change the number of roads. It at least relatively less wiggle room than private projects. When you're doing a private project, it might be a lot easier to, kind of redesign your product or do very important tweaks that might help you better address your customers' needs. But when we're talking about Horizon Europe projects, we have to stick to the GA. Of course, some changes are possible, but they have to be well justified, and there is a certain process that you have to go through in order to integrate those changes into the grant agreement. Part of the grant agreement is also your reporting obligations. That means that you, in regular periods, you have to report the work you have been doing and the costs that you have incurred in order to implement the project. That means that aside from your research and innovation work, you will also be doing some reporting, some administrative work as well, which will take some time, not too much though, but it's something to keep in mind. And along similar lines, there are also some administrative requirements. You will have to declare how much time you have spent. You have to develop, if you don't have already, some systems that can help you track how many hours people are working on the project from your organization, which again might require some initial investment, some design of a management system, and it will take some time for your research and innovation work. Of course, if you systematically are able to fund your research and innovation through this project, all these kind of costs are kind of pulled together and end up not being an issue at all. What I'm trying to say is, in essence, that before you take the time or before you take the decision better to invest into an application, you need to think whether Horizon Europe is the right program to fund not just your organization, but also what you want to achieve in terms of, innovating your business or improving your product or solution, or whatever the goal is that has pushed you towards this direction. And there are or have been companies that, found this as their proper program for them. Apostolos, would you like to give us some insight into that? What has driven businesses towards this direction?
Yeah, sure. So just like what we saw with 8plex, there are several successful cases of small companies or even companies on the making to join large consortia. And this is, as Costa says, this is a multi-dimensional opportunity for such cases because you get access besides the funding, quite good collaboration ties, but also a lot of support in making your project, your ideas, your services better and closer to the market because you have a lot of people supporting. And this is also one of the drivers, or if you like, the enablers for reaching out to a successful proposal, the strong ties and synergies with larger organizations such as research centers, academia, industrial stakeholders, or even accelerators and incubators. So there are networks that can support a lot into finding the right consortium, the right opportunity for you and your company. And um, there are quite different approaches here. A very good example is that if you have a unique value proposition but a flexible mindset, it could be an excellent trade-off for getting a spot, getting a place in such a consortium. So there was a very good example from a nice startup that they have a very specific service, a product to be accurate, and it was extremely cutting edge. So nobody else in the entire world had this opportunity, this project, and it was exactly what one of the calls was looking out for. So a huge organization, huge European organization, after searching a little bit and Googling a little bit, found them and offered them a huge amount to join the consortium and to actually scale up everything and join hands with them with the proposal, with the project as a vehicle to access a lot of different markets. And they joined the consortium. They were successful in procuring the grant, and through that they actually managed to scale up and be a multidimensional company right now in Europe, Asia, and the US. This is the flexible mindset has to do with the fact that, okay, you have a project, you have a service. However, there might be opportunities or there might be calls that may require for you to change a little bit the way you approach your service and your product. This is not necessarily a bad thing because it can open your horizon in general on the way you see things, the way you approach the customers, the way you actually draft and shape your product or your service. So being open-minded when checking out the calls and checking out the consortium is always a good scenario to identify new products or new opportunities in general. And just a final comment on that is that the funding that you get, even if we're talking about research and innovation action, where you have 100% funding, so you can you get reimbursed for everything, you have to bear in mind that these funds are for very specific implementation objectives. So the grant agreement has very specific guidelines on what you have to do with throughout these 2, 3, or 4 years, or even more in some cases. So it's not that you get some funds and you can do them whatever you like, but you have to use them specifically for what has been promised within the proposal. So as you understand, there's a need to align here your objectives, your vision for your company, and how this fits in a large consortium, in a large proposal and a large project that, of course, can help you, but you have to have a lot of things in mind when actually going through it. And just like Aplex, there are a lot of cases of small companies that are currently within such consortium. We are working already with a few of them in several projects, and it's always a great opportunity to interact and work with them because they have a different vision. They are enthusiasts in research in general, and such networks are always bound to help each other succeed. So these are some of the very good pros of joining such a consortium.
Okay, aside this presentation that we're going to have today, also in the future, I think these are two very important sources of information for everything that has to do with Horizon Europe, whether it's Pillar 2 or all the other pillars as well. So the first one is the Horizon Europe Info Days. The Commission and its agencies, they typically organize this kind of events. It used to be, or some of them used to be, physical events where you would go and meet with other people, hear more about specific calls for proposal and specific topics from firsthand to understand what the Commission is really looking for from the proposers that are interested in this kind of topics.